The midday sun beats down upon the ancient, weathered stone of Windsor Castle, casting sharp shadows across the cobblestones of a fortress that has stood as a silent sentinel over British history for nearly 1,000 years. On this particular summer afternoon, the air is thick, not just with the heat of June, but with an almost palpable sense of expectation, a strange and uniquely British mixture of solemn majesty and absolute unhinged spectacle. To the uninitiated onlooker, the scene unfolding within these historic walls might seem like something lifted straight from the pages of a medieval fantasy novel or a grand theatrical production where costumed actors have wandered off their stage. Men and women of immense status and privilege emerge into the bright daylight, draped in heavy, sweeping mantles of the deepest blue velvet, their shoulders adorned with massive, glittering silver stars that catch the brilliant sunlight with every step they take. Upon their heads, they balance black velvet hats, topped with towering, nodding plumes of white ostrich feathers that flutter gently in the warm breeze, while a peculiar strip of dark blue velvet, embroidered with golden lettering, is buckled tightly around the left leg of the gentleman. This is not a historical reenactment, nor is it a cinematic film set, but rather the annual manifestation of the single most exclusive, venerable, and ancient order of chivalry in the entire United Kingdom. This is the day when the British monarchy sheds its modern, tailored suits and bureaucratic responsibilities to plunge headfirst into a world of pure, unadulterated pageantry, celebrating an institution that has survived plagues, revolutions, and the rise and fall of empires. It is a day that perfectly encapsulates the enduring paradox of the British royal family, a moment where the absurd and the sacred walk hand in hand down Castle Hill, captivating thousands of spectators who have gathered from across the globe to witness a living piece of history. As we begin this deep dive into the fascinating, dramatic, and occasionally scandalous world of the British monarchy during its most intense ceremonial week, we invite you to join our growing community of history enthusiasts and royal watchers. If you find yourself captivated by the strange traditions, the hidden palace dynamics, and the grand spectacles of the British crown, please take a brief moment to support our channel by hitting the subscribe button, liking this video, and turning on notifications so you never miss an analysis of these historic events. The sheer scale of the spectacle on display today serves as a powerful reminder of how the monarchy utilizes the magic of ancient ritual to maintain its grip on the public imagination, transforming ordinary flesh and blood individuals into figures of semi-divine romance. For the duration of this magnificent procession, the heavy burdens of the modern world seem to vanish, replaced by the rhythmic clinking of ceremonial metals, the rustle of white taffeta linings, and the steady, solemn march of the knights and ladies of the Garter towards St. George's Chapel. Yet, beneath the surface of this glorious sunlit parade, beneath the towering ostrich feathers and the pristine white fur trims that seem so wonderfully ridiculous in the height of summer, lies a complex web of modern family tension and strategic narrative management. This week represents the absolute pinnacle of the royal calendar, a carefully orchestrated marathon of public visibility that includes the military precision of the Trooping the Color, the medieval romance of the Garter Day procession, and the high society glamour of royal ascot. It is a time when the palace press offices are working at maximum capacity, capitalizing on the immense wave of public goodwill and patriotic pride generated by these stunning visuals to quietly release annual financial accounts and shape the overarching narrative of the family's future. The grand pageantry serves as a beautiful, distracting shield, allowing the family to dictate the public agenda and present a united, flawless front to a world that is increasingly demanding transparency, authenticity, and modern accountability from its traditional leaders. As the procession moves forward, the contrast between different generations of royals becomes strikingly apparent. Highlighting the delicate balance the institution must strike between preserving the ancient mysteries that give it authority and adapting to the sensibilities of a contemporary audience. King Charles stands in the bright sunshine, seemingly radiant and entirely in his element, embodying a historical truth that he has never met a ceremonial outfit or an ancient convoluted ritual that he did not thoroughly enjoy and embrace with his whole heart. His presence in the elaborate Garter robes is a testament to his deep respect for the mystical traditions of the crown, a stark contrast to his son, Prince William, whose expression occasionally hints at a more complex, perhaps slightly more skeptical relationship with such overt displays of elitism. Rumors and speculation have long circulated within royal circles that the future king may look to slim down or even eliminate some of these more archaic and visually extravagant traditions when his time comes to ascend the throne. Yet, as the crowds cheer and the historic banners flutter against the summer sky, there is a growing sense among onlookers that even the most idealistic or modern-minded young royals eventually succumb to the undeniable power and utility of this magnificent pageantry. The dedication to these grand traditions is what separates the British monarchy from the ordinary functional heads of state found throughout the rest of Europe, providing a sense of cultural continuity and timeless romance that cannot be replicated by modern public relations campaigns. Watching the senior royals parade past, flanked by the household cavalry and surrounded by the ancient stone architecture of Windsor, it becomes clear that these rituals are not merely empty theatrical exercises, but vital tools of statecraft designed to reinforce the legitimacy of the crown. The atmosphere is charged with a unique energy, a sense that those standing in the crowd are witnessing an unbroken chain of human history that stretches back through the centuries, connecting the modern House of Windsor with the legendary kings and queens of old. This specific event, with its bizarre focus on a piece of medieval legwear and its strict limitation to only 24 companion members at any given time, represents the ultimate inner sanctum of British honors. A club so exclusive that even the most senior working royals must wait for a vacancy to arise. It is a world where symbols carry the weight of law, where the presence or absence of a single individual can send shockwaves through the international press, and where a simple piece of embroidered velvet holds the power to define a legacy. As the doors of St. George's Chapel prepare to open for the traditional afternoon service, the ultimate significance of this day begins to crystallize, setting the stage for a much deeper exploration of the bizarre origins, the hidden family conflicts, and the dramatic exclusions that are quietly defining the modern era of the British crown. The absolute centerpiece of this majestic yet utterly surreal gathering is an item of clothing that seems entirely out of place in a modern constitutional monarchy, a paradox that requires us to step back nearly 7 centuries into the dust and drama of medieval Europe. To understand why the sovereign of the United Kingdom stands in the summer heat wearing a velvet strap around his leg, we must travel back to the year 1348 and examine the mind of King Edward III, a monarch who can best be described as the ultimate giant of the English royal lineage. Edward III was not a quiet, bureaucratic administrator, but rather a towering, tremendously good-looking warrior king, a man of immense physical stature who defined the bloody, chivalric romance of the 100 Years' War and led his knights to legendary victories at the Battle of Crecy. He was an absolute lover of life, a king who relished jousting tournaments, grand feasts, heavy drinking, and the company of beautiful women, embodying the ultimate archetype of a medieval alpha male. It was entirely within the character of this rambunctious, high-living king to found the highest order of English chivalry on the basis of what can only be described as a scandalous, whispered courtroom rumor and a bit of schoolboy humor that has been elevated into a sacred national institution. The widely accepted legend takes us to a grand royal ball packed with the medieval elite, where a prominent and stunningly beautiful noblewoman, widely believed to be either Joan, the Countess of Salisbury, or the Countess of Kent, was dancing gracefully before the entire court. In an era long before the invention of modern undergarments or elastic materials, keeping one's wardrobe secure required an intricate system of ribbons and bands, and as the Countess moved across the floor, her dark blue garter slipped from her thigh, falling directly onto the polished floor. In the hyper-vigilant, highly competitive atmosphere of a 14th century royal court, a lady's garter appearing on the ground was a scandalous revelation, sparking immediate, malicious smirks and audibly stifled giggles from the gathered courtiers who assumed she had been engaged in illicit, passionate activities behind closed doors. Seeing the immediate humiliation of his companion, who many suspected was actually his secret mistress, King Edward III stepped forward with a display of raw bravado, picking up the piece of intimate underwear from the floor and boldly buckling it around his own leg. Turning a cold, piercing glare upon the smirking, sniggering courtiers, the king delivered a sharp rebuke in Norman French, declaring "Honi soit qui mal y pense," a phrase that translates technically to "shame on him who thinks evil of it," or more casually, "dirty minds think dirty thoughts." Edward then announced that he would elevate this mocked piece of ribbon to such an incredibly high status that the most noble knights in Christendom would be desperately proud to wear it, transforming an embarrassing bedroom mishap into a timeless symbol of absolute honor. Whether this tale represents a magnificent example of royal gallantry or a spectacularly clever piece of historical revisionism designed to cover up an active royal affair, the motto remains embedded in the royal coat of arms to this day, a permanent reminder that the British crown has always been masterful at spinning human scandal into gold. This ancient brotherhood was designed by Edward to mimic the legendary Knights of the Round Table, establishing a fiercely loyal elite group of warriors bound directly to the sovereign by sacred oaths of chivalry, mutual defense, and unyielding honor. The structure of the Order of the Garter remains astonishingly strict to this very day, limited at any given time to the reigning monarch, the Prince of Wales, and a mere 24 companion members, creating a level of exclusivity that makes it the most coveted honor in the gift of the British crown. Unlike standard state honors, which are heavily vetted and recommended by committees of civil servants and political government officials, appointments to the Order of the Garter are entirely within the personal gift of the sovereign, allowing the monarch to choose individuals based purely on personal respect and national merit. Over the centuries, this has led to an eclectic, esoteric gathering of members that traditionally includes former prime ministers, senior members of the royal family, and distinguished national figures such as the legendary composer Andrew Lloyd Webber, all of whom carry the prestigious letters KG after their names. Because membership is strictly granted for life, a vacancy only opens when a companion member passes away, meaning the living members form an incredibly tight-knit, permanent circle that represents the absolute apex of British high society. Yet, it is this exact rule of lifelong permanency that has created an explosive, deeply uncomfortable modern crisis for King Charles, as the grand pageantry of this year's Garter Day procession has forced a massive, highly controversial exclusion into the glaring spotlight of the international media. For the first time in modern memory, Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, was entirely absent from the public proceedings, vanished from the historic line of march, an omission that signals a brutal, final severing of his ties to the public face of the British monarchy. To fully appreciate the shocking nature of this development, one must realize that despite the catastrophic, unyielding avalanche of public scandal that has surrounded Prince Andrew since his disastrous associations with Jeffrey Epstein came to light, he had remained a member of this exclusive order in good standing. Prince Andrew had been appointed a Knight of the Garter by his mother in 2006, a choice that seemed entirely unremarkable at the time for a decorated Falklands War veteran, a hard-working son of the monarch, and a prominent figure on the global stage. Even as the horrifying legal depositions, the shocking photographs of Virginia Giuffre, and the global condemnation intensified throughout the 2010s, leading to his removal as a roving trade ambassador, the palace continued to protect his private status within this ancient chivalric order. When the ultimate crisis hit in early 2022, resulting in a multi-million-dollar out-of-court civil settlement that many viewed as an absolute admission of moral ruin, Queen Elizabeth II stripped him of his military titles and royal patronages. But his Garter membership was left untouched. While it is widely acknowledged that the late Queen possessed a deep maternal blind spot when it came to her second son, consistently protecting him within the private spheres of the family, she passed away in September of 2022, leaving the throne and the management of this crisis entirely in the hands of King Charles. What has caused an incredible, simmering fury among seasoned royal commentators is the realization that for nearly three subsequent years, King Charles continued to actively enable, endorse, and permit his brother's ongoing participation in the highly private, exclusive elements of Garter Day. Throughout 23, 24, and even as late as June of 25, long after the late Queen was gone, Prince Andrew was still swinging in and out of Windsor Castle, attending the private royal luncheons, hobnobbing with former prime ministers, and maintaining his sacred carved wooden stall inside St. George's Chapel. The mainstream British legacy media has frequently pushed a carefully crafted narrative emanating from the King's press office, claiming that Charles has been trapped, left dealing with an unexploded bomb inherited from his mother's reign. Unable to quickly cancel the metaphorical direct debits or evict his brother from royal properties. But the harsh, undeniable timeline reveals that King Charles was the absolute head of the monarchy during these years, overseeing a desperate, ill-fated, and deeply frustrating attempt to slowly rehabilitate his disgraced brother by constantly inviting him to public Christmas church services, family summer holidays at Balmoral, and private chivalric events. This ongoing enablement finally reached a dramatic, explosive breaking point behind palace walls, driven not by the king's own volition, but by the fierce, uncompromising intervention of Prince William, who reportedly refused to even participate in the public procession if his uncle was allowed to march alongside them in his velvet robes. Faced with a rebellion from the ultimate future of the monarchy, King Charles was effectively dragged kicking and screaming to a definitive decision late last year, finally moving to officially remove Prince Andrew from the active roll of members and ordering the physical removal of his personal heraldic banner from the roof of St. George's Chapel. The removal of that carved wooden stall and the heraldic coat of arms represent as a massive, devastating psychological blow in the world of royal symbolism, making it clear that the Duke of York has been permanently exiled from the highest sanctuary of royal honor. This fierce internal battle over legacy and accountability has transformed this year's Garter Day from a simple, sunny celebration of medieval romance into a high-stakes arena of modern crisis management, where the past and the future of the House of Windsor are locked in a tense, silent struggle for survival. The dramatic removal of Prince Andrew's personal heraldic banner from the vaulted ceilings of St. George's Chapel is far more than a simple matter of palace housekeeping. It is a profound and irreversible shifting of the tectonic plates that underpin the modern British monarchy. In the hyper-symbolic language of the British crown, where every gesture, every piece of fabric, and every carved piece of wood carries the weight of ancient law, the empty space left above that historic wooden stall speaks volumes to a public demanding contemporary moral accountability. To fully comprehend why this final exile matters so intensely, one must look closely at the biographies of the central individuals involved in this quiet palace revolution and examine how their personal histories have shaped the current destiny of the House of Windsor. Prince Andrew, born in 1960 as the second son and third child of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, was long regarded as the golden boy of the royal family, a dashing, confident prince who captured the hearts of the British public during his active service as a helicopter pilot in the Falklands War. He was a man who grew up wrapped in an impenetrable blanket of royal privilege, accustomed to absolute deference, and imbued with a dangerous sense of personal invincibility that would ultimately prove to be his undoing on the global stage. His tragic descent from a decorated national hero and global trade ambassador to a deeply isolated figure, permanently barred from public life, represents one of the most spectacular individual falls from grace in the long, turbulent history of the British royal family. Opposite this tragic figure stands King Charles, a monarch whose entire adult life was defined by the longest apprenticeship in British history, a man who spent decades waiting in the wings, developing highly specific, deeply romanticized ideas about the spiritual and cultural role of the sovereign. Charles has spent his entire existence obsessed with the preservation of historical legacy, an intellectual who views the grand rituals of state not as empty theatrical performances, but as vital, living conduits of national identity and divine continuity. Yet, this deep reverence for history has frequently clashed with his intense, agonizing personal loyalties. creating a complex psychological battlefield where his duty to protect the absolute purity of the crown has repeatedly been compromised by his deep-seated desire to protect and rehabilitate his younger brother. This agonizing conflict is what makes the fierce, uncompromising stance of Prince William so incredibly significant, revealing a future king who possesses a surprisingly ruthless, pragmatic understanding of modern public relations and institutional survival. Prince William, whose life was irrevocably shaped by the tragic, highly publicized struggles of his mother, Princess Diana, views the monarchy through a starkly different, far more unsentimental lens than his father. Recognizing that the institution can no longer survive on the myth of divine right alone, William understands with absolute clarity that in the 21st century, the royal family exists solely by the consent of the public, and that harboring a deeply compromised individual within the highest, most sacred circles of royal honor represents an existential threat to his own future throne. This generational divide has created an intense, silent friction behind the scenes, a dynamic where the idealistic, traditionalist father is constantly being pushed toward harsh, modern realism by a son who is entirely willing to make brutal, sweeping decisions to secure the longevity of the crown. This exact same sense of modern gravity and flawless professionalism is precisely why the public has warmed so intensely to Catherine, the Princess of Wales, who has emerged over the past several years as the ultimate, indispensable asset for the future of the British monarchy. Catherine, who entered the royal family as a non-aristocratic woman from a stable, supportive middle-class background, has mastered the incredibly difficult art of combining a profound, dignified gravity with a genuine, warm approachability that resonates deeply with ordinary people. Her presence at the recent ceremonial events, captured in striking footage as she maintained an absolute, unyielding composure while riding in a carriage with her children past shouting, aggressive protesters, has solidified her reputation as a figure of immense strength and resilience. She delivered a brilliant, sharp death stare to those who would disrupt a national celebration by booing young children, a moment that perfectly illustrated her fierce protective instincts and her refusal to let the dignity of the royal house be compromised by modern political rancor. The sheer importance of figures like William and Catherine becomes even more apparent when one considers how incredibly lucky the royal family was that Prince Harry had not been appointed to the Order of the Garter before his abrupt, highly chaotic departure from the United Kingdom several years ago. Had Prince Harry been granted that lifetime honor before his highly publicized relocation to California, the palace would currently be facing an even more convoluted, deeply embarrassing public nightmare. Trying to navigate the removal of yet another high-profile prince from the ancient roles of chivalry, the current composition of the House of Windsor highlights a stark reality, showing a heavily slimmed-down institution where the heavy lifting of public duty is being carried by a dwindling number of dedicated individuals, including the indefatigable Princess Anne and Prince Edward, while the outer branches of the family tree are systematically pruned away. This radical consolidation of royal power and visibility is part of a deliberate long-term strategy designed to transform the monarchy into a leaner, more efficient, and financially transparent organization that can withstand the intense scrutiny of a modern democratic society. The magnificent, sunlit parade through the streets of Windsor, with its dazzling display of ostrich feathers, blue velvet, and glittering stars, is the ultimate manifestation of this strategy. A masterful exercise in narrative management that reminds the world of the unique, irreplaceable cultural heritage that the British crown represents. It is a vital reminder that despite the intense family dramas, the shocking legal settlements, and the quiet backroom banishments, the British monarchy remains an incredibly powerful machine, capable of capturing the global imagination and uniting millions of people through the sheer power of shared ritual and historical romance. As the echoes of the grand procession fade and the historic gates of Windsor Castle close once more, the true legacy of this historic Garter Day becomes brilliantly clear, marking the definitive end of an era of compromise and the resolute beginning of a disciplined, modern future. The crown has once again demonstrated its ancient, predatory instinct for self-preservation, proving that it will willingly sacrifice its own princes, rewrite its own history, and purge its most exclusive sanctuaries to ensure that the unbroken chain of sovereignty continues to endure for generations to come.